Cows in Red Dead Redemption 2 are stubborn domesticated animals that try to convince everyone that them being in pens and belonging to someone else was their idea. They have a bad temper, they cannot descend from heights, they hate horses because they are taller and somewhat practical, and they get annoyed at every inconvenience that comes their way. They also have the power to make it rain by sitting on their backside to ruin everyone else's day because, I don't know, they probably think it's funny. However, now is the time to see life through the eyes of cows and see if their lives are as dissatisfying as they seem to believe. I mean, if your life was summed up by being brought up only to get fat and walk into a house of knives at the end of your life, you would be pretty bloody miserable as well. At least they can enjoy the fresh air. But anyway, what if you played Red Dead Redemption 2 as a cow? So I loaded up the first mission, tried to turn myself into a cow, and the game quite promptly slammed the door right in my face by killing me instantly to stop such an experiment from being conducted. So to counter that, I simply tick the option that says copy model only, and there you go, an absolutely disgusting creature that the game looks at me and says, yes, that is completely normal, let them through. How could I ever doubt you, Rockstar? You are like the bouncers on the door of a nightclub with a severe lack of self-esteem. Anyway, we met up with Micah, and this creation can be seen during the cutscene, which is more disturbing than finding out the biscuit tin is empty. Watched over Dutch, and you can actually see Arthur's hair, almost as if Arthur's soul is trapped within this creature and he can only communicate by styling his hair into the Statue of Liberty. Chase down the remaining home invaders, which from their point of view is probably more terrifying than playing football against Erling Haaland as he's breathing down your neck. Yes, I had been watching the World Cup and can sum up my thoughts of it all in 8 words. Thank God we managed to beat the French. Searched the cupboards in the house whilst presenting myself like a baboon. Punched another guy to death, although he probably found it very stressful since he had no idea what fleshy limb was smacking him in the face. And to be honest, I didn't have a clue either. Found Sadie, who was right to be completely terrified at what had been presented before her eyes. For once, Micah wasn't the scariest thing in the room. It's like Jason Voorhees entering your house and you're more scared of the fact he left the door open. Returned to the main campsite, and the next day, even the cameraman himself was petrified of Arthur's new form and refused to go inside to film the next shot of him. So we just stayed outside with him and the horses, waiting for summer to finally arrive. I gave up on the main story, so I respawned in the Heartlands and took this as the perfect environment to turn myself into a cow. Properly this time. After cycling through all the different paint jobs for myself, I finally settled on a design and made sure I had horns. Because I don't know. A cow that has horns in my eyes just looks more badass, and if anyone gives me grief I can turn them into a shish kebab. Turns out, as a cow, you don't scare off any of the local wildlife, like this rabbit, clearly giving less shits than a blocked colon. I made my way to Valentine, and after an elongated time of 5 seconds, I had run out of stamina. I guess long distance running gets on with cows the same way the bubonic plague got on with medieval Europe. Bumped into a wagon with these two guys that I can only imagine are somewhat tolerant of each other. I mean, that's the best way I can describe two men riding on a wagon together. Who am I to pass judgment? Moments later, I tried boarding the wagon and turned into a tummy-turning torturous image of an animal that can dispense milk. And rightly so, the two men abandoned the wagon. Because why the fuck wouldn't they when an animal starts turning into a possessed soul belonging to a demon that has an unequivocal dislike towards cows? The two NPCs also had a very American solution to such a supernatural event that they need to ask me whether or not their gun barrels smell of cordite. They didn't fire their guns, however. I suppose they became a bit nervous that this might turn into a catastrophic game of tag. Anyway, to sort out this issue, I respawned myself as a cow and flopped off the wagon like the poor sales of Nintendo's Virtual Boy reality headset from the 90s. The two men, however, began their own betrayal arc as one of them chucks the other one off the wagon and rides off with the supplies, and they start shooting at each other. I suppose at this point in time, companionship in America is entirely based off financial gain or for sacrificial purposes. Anyway, I was still trying to figure out the controls and struggling to come to a conclusion on whether or not the cow has designated attacks designed to inflict on anyone who thinks parking the bus with 30 minutes left in the fucking game was a good idea. Moments later, I pressed the wrong button and it pushed me out of the game like franchise fans gatekeeping your very grounded take on why their latest installment is about as entertaining as snorting spaghetti. I relaunched the game and decided that as a cow, running to a location would take the same amount of time as British politicians gaining a sense of social awareness. So as a solution, I got on my horse and we rode to Valentine instead. Despite the horse having 1,500 pounds of ground beef on his back, he didn't seem all that affected, let alone giving a fuck in the slightest. We arrived in Valentine and everyone thought a cow riding a horse into a town in the 1800s was completely normal. I spoke to a soldier from the Civil War who was missing an arm and he started accusing me of being crazy.
Hey, Mr. Arthur! Why are you always so mad? You're crazy.
Yet he is the one having a conversation with a slow-cooked brisket on legs. He stopped accusing me of being crazy and asked if I thought I was crazy. Annoyingly, the game didn't allow me to answer like a lawyer telling his client not to respond to a video that finds them guilty. I knocked him over and my attention was turned towards these two turnips keeping sheep. I said hello to them and they gave me a gift of a lead core covered by a copper alloy jacket and lots of them. Got shot a few more times, freed some sheep, and after breaking line of sight with the enemies, I decided to try and blend in with the locals like I was in Assassin's Creed. Astoundingly, this didn't work the way I wanted it to, and the enemies opened fire and hit everything that wasn't me. I guess the enemies have the same eyesight as a triple-toed sloth. I started knocking over more farmers, making them know how it feels when their life gets flipped, turned upside down, and I would like to take a minute, so just sit right there. I am going to show you how I was more of a threat to a town than a bear. Not kidding, I made about 3 or 4 homicides in one sitting and everyone didn't really know what to do. Even the sheriff didn't seem to give a fuck about all the murders I had been committing. At most, he puts his hands on his hips, looked down at me with a scolding look on his face like he's about to tell off his 8-year-old son because he keeps setting the neighbor's cat on fire. Changed myself into a bull, so if some of you are a bit confused, I have essentially changed gender. I know that sounds patronizing, but years back I knew someone who didn't know what a cow even looked like, so I wasn't taking any chances. Continued my rampage as a bull, and here's some good advice. If you are caught in a situation exactly like this, when a bull is running rampant in your town, do not walk down the street directly behind someone else, because they will see the danger, jump out the way, and leave you to embrace a 2,200-pound male animal that hasn't jerked off for 3 months, running at 35 miles per hour into your spangly little body with 2 shivs strapped to its face. Unless you are Johnny Knoxville, you aren't surviving that shit. After running over farmers, almost enduring an actual stroke, and spazzing out on a guy's wagon, I managed to prove that cows can indeed descend from elevated positions. It involved falling off a cliff, but the point still stands. The conclusion is rock solid, and ultimately, bulls are basically too angry to die. Found a prospector who gets really bloody violent when you invade his personal space, even though you are a hormonal ticking time bomb that's got spears coming out of his ears. Although I couldn't kill him, as with every enemy that starts fighting back, I couldn't knock them over. It's like they know when the point of contact is and decide to fuse their feet to the ground. Doesn't matter though, as further down the riverbank I found a nice rock to hide behind and ultimately waited for him to either figure out how to make his way down the riverbank like I did, or get bored. And luckily it was the latter. Had an intelligent conversation with a hunter.
Dakota, tall trees, big valley, Roanoke. I run this stall just about everywhere. Best way to source the skins.
Got stuck on a bit of furniture and the situation got worse when I realised I had no reverse gear. Made my way back to New Hanover and the game just said to me, bored now, and crashed my game. I ended up floating between the realms of the game world with textures, lights and colours, and the vacuous, feckless void that the game uses to stash its porn magazines it found in a bush. Relaunched the game and took a stroll into the vacuous, feckless void this game actually designed, and that's New Austin, because the old Austin wasn't doing it for us. Found a traveller enjoying the warmth of a fire, even though he is essentially setting up camp in the epitome of Satan's bumcrack, but there you go. He probably has slower metabolism, low muscle mass or hormonal difference, or maybe he just enjoys overheating like a frog with 0 survival instincts enjoying a warm bath. Anyway, he didn't like the explanation I had for his situation, so I left him to it. Arrived at Tumbleweed and started hurling abuse at the horses. Started loitering around like hooded teenagers on a council estate. Found a guy looting dead bodies, noticing a distinct lack of justice towards someone committing a crime just around the corner from a sheriff who boasts about him being on top of all the brutalities in the area. I knocked him on his ass, he fired off a few bullets and died from a heart attack. I guess his body's fight or flight system kicked in and he couldn't make his mind up. Even some crows came to check up on him, to see if he's alright before they start cataloguing his remains for the black market. Encountered a robbery where 2 armed men were bullying the founder of the National Express and had 1 or 2 things to say about their severe lapse in punctuality. Anyway, since these guys were more wired than an anxious criminal preparing himself to get shafted either way, they used this time to try out all their different weapons, presumably to make sure their were all still working properly, like a manager putting out a second string team. The outcome being they tried punching an angry bull to death, arrived in Armadillo, and immediately I noticed that they are the remaining group of people that still believe Ubisoft will release a decent game. There were still other people visibly ill and puking themselves to death, so I decided to put them out of their misery. I suppose it's the cow's equivalent to being taken behind the shed and shot. After heeding the advice of total strangers who were probably coming off an extraordinary high from a bunch of mushrooms to think they could fully convince a cow to understand the English language, I left the town. Arrived at a rundown settlement that was the home to a landing of thieves. Yeah, okay, I forced that one a bit, but anyway. I sucker charged the lookout guards, which led to a very intelligent conversation involving bullets. After that, I can only imagine they ran out of said bullets because they surrendered, recognizing my dominance and promising fealty. I took a tour of their operation, but clearly they did not think to widen the docks as I fell into the river several times. They refused to help me, so I took this as a betrayal, and they would be punished as soon as I found a way onto dry land. This bloody owl got involved in the altercation, but the dopey twat forgot to keep his distance, as I indirectly trampled him into the ground so much he could have delivered a message to China. I started to dispense justice to these pricks and it was going well, right until my big fat ass walked off the end of the dock into the river, twice in fact. Went into a smaller cluttered section of their base and finally understood what it was really like to be a bull in a china shop. I could not fucking move. Most of the time it was because I was stuck on a discarded tin of baked beans. I decided to sack off the rest of the gang and went to sleep in the corner. The next morning I tried one more time to kill them all, but I ended up in the river again. I have so much patience and no social life, so you may as well drown yourself now, otherwise this will only get worse for you. I gave up on that and went to a slightly easier target, a huge fort belonging to the US military. Through the use of no other mods, I was able to land on the walls of the fort. Clearly, cows are so incredibly acrobatic they were able to scale the 15 feet of sturdy timber palisades with no issue. This area was also not built for my size, as I got stuck on a piece of wood immediately, as the soldiers just looked on and pretended I didn't exist. The soldiers did eventually attempt to put me out of my misery, and I was unable to fight back due to me being stuck on another piece of wood. I called for backup and a group of cows ascended from the soil to aid my cause. Unfortunately, they were about as useful as a sandpaper condom. The soldiers didn't even see them as a threat, as they started running around their new pen completely bewildered by the lack of space. A bit like when you let your friend stay around your flat and he simply refuses to leave no matter how many times you shit in his pillowcase. Moments later, a pandemic happened and wiped everyone out in the fort. Because I suppose Mother Nature thought this area is getting way too cramped, so it's time to trim the numbers down. After that, I think I had to close the book on what life is like being a cow in Red Dead Redemption 2, because the answer is really fucking dull. I'm sorry for wasting your time on this question, where you could have got the answer from a field or a supermarket, but there you go. Anyway, that will do for this video. I hope you enjoyed the adventures of a cow bullying half the population of the United States, because fuck, what else are you going to do with your time? If you did enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I would very much appreciate it, especially since you made it to the end. If you would like to see another video of mine, it will be on screen. Trust me, you will have an absolute blast with it. Anyway, thank you for putting up with me and for lending me your patience, and I will hopefully see you all in the next video.